You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Hey, if you've seen The Greatest Showman, remember the scene with Zac Efron and Zendaya swinging on ropes and singing Rewrite the Stars? That was a big part of the latest episode of Moon Knight, except it's Stephen Grant and Khonshu singing. We talk Moon Knight Episode 3 on today's Dan Wickline Show. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. Today we're going to be talking about Moon Knight because, well, Moon Knight dropped earlier this week and we have lots to talk about. It was just another amazing episode of a show that just seems to be getting better and better. But I do want to hit a couple bits of news before we jump into the recap and discussion. And the first one has to be Neil Gaiman seems to be doing great getting his stuff put on the air because HBO now has just ordered a series based on the Dead Boy Detectives, which is another group of characters that Neil Gaiman came up with. And the series is going to star George Rextrew and Jaden Reverie as Edwin Payne and Charles Rowland, respectively. And Cassius Nelson from Last Night in Soho is going to be playing Crystal Palace. I assume Crystal Palace is a person, but then again, when it comes to things like Doom Patrol, you never know. Danny was a street. It could be a place. So, now the other big news has to do with DC, the effects of the Warner Brothers Discovery merger, buyout. Really depends on how you want to spin that, but basically Discovery is taking over Warner Brothers, and the new CEO is David Zaslav, and he has been talking to Variety, and he said that he wants to turn DC into its own solidified content vertical, which I think pretty much means that it's just building money for itself. Because, you know, DC used to make shows for all these other channels. You had Pennyworth on Epix. You had all of the shows on the CW. You had stuff going on all the different channels, basically. Well, they've been starting to streamline. Pennyworth is now over on HBO Max. A lot of the shows on the CW seem to be coming to an end. That may be hastened by the buyout. So don't get too attached to the Arrowverse. Me personally, I tapped out after Crisis and they killed off Oliver Queen. So we may be losing most of that, or what's left may get shifted over to HBO Max. Just like, they're kind of condensing everything down. But the other thing they're talking about is bringing in somebody to be the new creative strategic czar, or as what the rest of us would call it, DC needs a Kevin Feige, which I have been saying for years now. And there looks like they're actually going to get it. They're looking for someone with a background needed to keep all the different factions of DC working more harmoniously. So basically, someone who can handle the film and the publishing and the licensing and really kind of get that cohesiveness together. Now, I don't know if Kevin Feige had all of that knowledge going in, or if he just had the right idea of how to do things and surrounded himself with the right people. And I think that's probably more the issue. So it's going to be interesting to see who they end up getting, because, I mean, all right, look, I'd miss doing this show, but Mr. Zaslav, if you're out there and you need me, I'm sure we could work something out. Just have your people call my people. So, all right, those are the two big news stories today, but we want to jump into talking about our friend Moon Knight. This was another, again, terrific episode. And I think the detractors that I have heard about the show all seem to be talking about the same thing, and that is the changes it's made from the MCU or from the comics. And I got to say, at this point, I'm okay with the changes, and I understand them because the changes in the comics took place over the 45 years, 47 years Moon Knight's been around. I mean, he started off as a guy infected with werewolf blood and who got super strength or added strength when the moon was out. He was given the costume by a corporation who wanted him to hunt down a werewolf. Somehow that turned into the Fist of Khonshu, and the fact that there was a guy who had just a couple aliases that he used suddenly became someone with multiple personalities, or DID. And now, and the whole idea of Khonshu being involved was really more of a speculation, and now it's more of a permanent thing. So they're kind of skipping all of that past stuff and getting to the Moon Knight we have now. And in doing so, they've streamlined the character, and I think it works. I think it really works. I think it's accessible to the more of a general populace audience, which always upsets comic fans, and I get that. There are things that Marvel does that upsets me. There's things that DC does that upsets me. But I have to sit back, and I've mentioned this before, but there was a convention I went to when I was younger, and Todd McFarlane was speaking. This was around the time the Spawn movie was coming out. The animated series was on HBO, and he had the comics coming out. And somebody said, well, why isn't the movie and the animated series the same as the comics? And his answer was kind of incredulous. He's like, why would you want it to be? Why would you want to take the exact same story and just tell it again in a different medium when you could go a slightly different direction? You could give this property that you love and worked on in comics to somebody else to do their version of it in animation, and then another person to do their version in film. So you get these multiple renderings and different stories. And it's no different than like myths and stuff in a lot of ways. How many myths have changed over the years through storytelling and passing it on? I'm okay with the movies being their own entity and animated series being their own entities. They don't have to line up perfectly, as long as they keep the heart of the character and the heart of the story. Now, I've seen some horrible adaptations, like the animated version of Hush that DC did a couple of years ago. They made some changes that were just horrible. It didn't make sense to the story. I didn't like it. But when it comes to something that a change they make that makes sense to the character, but you still have the heart of the character there, I'm okay with it. I look at, I always bring up Agatha Christie. The Death on the Nile movie that Kenneth Branagh does and Murder on the Orient Express, they make some changes. But at the heart, Branagh's playing the Poirot we know, and it's the mystery we know. I watched the John Malkovich ABC Murders on Prime, and it's nowhere near the Poirot we know. The whole time frame has changed. It has a much darker tone, a much more sinister tone, and none of it really goes to improve the story. It's just like they needed to do it to be different. So I like some changes when it solidifies and streamlines, but not if it takes away from what the original author was trying to get across. So yeah, they're taking a character who was made in 1975 and written on and off for 45 years, and they're trying to introduce it to a modern audience. They're going to make some changes. Now, let's recap the story here. This episode kicks off with Layla is visiting a woman she obviously knows well and who is trained by Layla's father. And I kind of get the feeling that it might be her mother, but at the same time, she doesn't call her mom. I mean, she's got candy for Layla, stuff like that, but it doesn't exactly solidify one way or the other. Hell, we only know her name is Ligero because it's in the subtitles. She doesn't actually call her by name at all. Well, the whole idea is she's here to get a fake passport, or so she can go back to Egypt. She hasn't been there in 10 years. It's where she's from, and she moved away having to do with her father's death. So that's the first piece of information we get that gives us kind of a time frame on when Layla's father is gone, which means that that might be when Mark was involved with it, because we know that Mark is wanted for these murders in Egypt. So it might be that same case. And we also get an idea that Layla is kind of a Indiana Jones type. You know, she's stealing artifacts, but only from the people who have already stolen them, because if an artifact is actually out of the pyramid that it was in, then basically that artifact was stolen. So she's just stealing the ones that have already been stolen, returning them to the people that they belong to, except occasionally she keeps a couple to pay bills. So she's not pure, but she's all right, you know. Now, as we see how good this woman is at making passports, made me start wondering, a lot of people were using the past Mark Spector's passport to say, oh, he didn't get blipped, which would be fine, except for now we see someone who obviously also knows Mark, who could make a fake passport. So is that passport legit? And if so, I mean, can we count on the data that's on the passport now? That kind of throws it into question. That's how we knew he hadn't been blipped, because his passport was issued in the time that people had been dusted. So now, maybe not. I still think he wasn't, but we'll have to see. In any case, we also learned that her father, like I said, has been dead for a while. And Ligaro obviously cares about Layla and misses Layla's father as well. And she's kind of hesitant to give her the passport, because I think she knows that it's going to there's a chance at danger, you know? So you see the hesitation, but she gives it anyway. So that's kind of interesting. The actress they got to play her is named Barbara Rosenblatt, and she's an English actress who you may have seen she was a recurring character in Orange is the New Black. She showed up on House of Cards, and she's also a major voice actor in the Grand Theft Auto video game franchise. So if you don't recognize her, you may recognize the voice. Now, so that is our opening. But Layla is also kind of explaining what happened with Mark, and we find out that Mark is actually in his flat is only about 20 minutes away from where Layla and Mark used to live. So Stephen is set up only 20 minutes away. Is that on purpose? Like, you know, just memory, or is that a bleed through? We're still trying to figure out if there is a third persona and they're the one that set everything up, or is Mark the one that set up? Because Stephen believes he's living in his mom's flat. And I'm not buying that there's an actual mother. So, at least that Stephen has an actual mother. All right, so after the opening credits, or the Marvel scroll and stuff, sorry about that. We got spam. Okay. After the opening thing, we end up in the Egyptian desert with Arthur Harrow. He's doing the kind of the mummies thing where they're walking along. He's got the little scarab out guiding him, and he comes to the spot and finds the actual location, and everybody rejoices, and they start digging, or he tells them to start digging, and one of his people come up and tells him Mark Spector's in Cairo and he's tracking them. Then we get a quick cut to what felt like the opening of Casino Royale. We get Mark Spector parkouring over the rooftops of Cairo. If you're a Jim Butcher fan, a Dresden Files fan, you may have heard him saying parkour in your head. That's just for the Dresden Files fans. But as he's moving along, he's really hurrying. He loses his hat. He's jumping over things, jumping over rooftops. And he gets to the spot that he's supposed to meet a guy. and the guy's getting stabbed and is killed. And Mark's not happy. He's like, I really needed to talk to that guy. Now I got to talk to you guys about where the dig site is. And they do that kind of the brandishing the knife. The guy pulls out this big, super shiny knife. And I have never seen anybody carrying a knife that polished before, that you could actually see your reflection in it, like clearly, like it's a mirror. So, little credulity issue there, but he tosses it in the air, he draws a little circle on the ground, and Mark's like, are we dancing or are we fighting? And we get this quick fight scene, and it's kind of a brutal fight scene. Mark is holding his own, and it shows that Mark is really a good fighter because he's holding his own against 2.5 guys. One of the guys is basically a teenager, and who all have knives, and Mark is unarmed, but he's kind of messing them up. But he's also careful not to be too aggressive towards the teenager. At one point, he could punch him and instead opens his hand and slaps him down. So all his kicks on the kid are a little pulled compared to what he's doing with the adults. But all three of them are trying to kill him. So he's going through this fight, and he gets to this point where he's about to mess up this one guy, and he's holding the knife, and he sees Steven's reflection in the blade of the knife. So again, super shiny. And Steven's like, Mark, no, don't. And next thing you know, we get the little blackout scene like we had in the first episode, except for now Mark comes to in the back of a taxi cab, finds out that he's on his way to the airport. And as they're driving along and he's trying to figure out what's going on, he sees two of the guys that he had just been fighting on the roof, the kid and one of the guys, gets out and tries to talk to them. And now these guys, their attitude has completely changed. Where before they were ready to mess up Mark, now they seem kind of scared of him and run. And he starts chasing them. And he eventually catches up to one of them, pins him against the wall, and is basically trying to beat him into telling him where the dig site is. And again, there's a mirror right next to him. And Steven's like, no, no, no. And he distracts Mark long enough that the third guy that we hadn't seen is back, hits Mark over the head. The other guy punches him. He falls on the ground. We get that cut scene blacking out again. And Mark comes to, and he's literally pulling a dagger out of one of the guys. They're back on on the edge of a cliff. And he's just killed one of them. You look down and you see that the other adult is dead, and the teenager is sliding away from him, leg obviously messed up, probably broken. And Mark is just stunned because he hadn't done this. And he's like, Steven, what have you done? And he sees the reflection, and Steven's like, I didn't do it. And right there, they don't spend a lot of time on it, but that's like total confirmation that either one of two things. We do have that third persona we've been talking about, or Khonshu took over the body. Now, I'm leaning more towards the third persona, and because we've been talking about the third persona, but I didn't think the third persona would be more violent than Mark. But if it is Jake, he can be violent. There has been some stuff in the comics about him being very no-nonsense and being kind of a street guy. So, and there's a couple points in the episode where Mark's accent seems to shift, where it's not the British one, it's not quite the regular American that he uses. It almost shifts into a New Yorker accent. So I'm wondering if we are going to get Jake, and if he's going to have kind of a New York accent. So he takes these guys out, and he's trying to get the information out of the teenager. And you hear Khonshu's voice finally going, take him to the ledge. And Mark's like, well, he's a kid. So you see that pulling the punches with the kid, hesitating about holding him over the ledge thing. it shows that Mark may not be as violent as we think he is. So, all right, we're going to pause here. It's time for our first commercial break. We'll come back with Mark and Khonshu and the teenager on the ledge right after this.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.
Imagine being at a convention and going to an interview panel that's just for you. No bustling crowds, no hours-long lines, just you, the moderator, and your favorite comic book creators. Well, this is pretty much that. Miss Jen sits down every week with 2 comic book creators for a live stream interview about their latest work, and you can ask them whatever you want. It's Talking Shop, Mondays at 5 Eastern on The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show. And before we get back into it, do me a favor. Hit that like and subscribe button that's down there, the little thumbs up, whatever it is on whichever format you're watching, because we're trying to build the channel. So the more people we get, the more access we have to different functionality with these different platforms. So if we get to a certain point on YouTube, we get a lot more functionalities. We can make our shows better with your help. So please hit the like button, subscribe buttons, all those things. That'll help us out a lot. Also, let me remind you that I do a pick of the week now. That's what is going to be here now on. This book will change, but right now we're doing Moon Knight #1. This was the book is by Jed MacKay and Alessandro Cappuccio. The regular covers by Steve McNiven. There's a few variant covers there's some really interesting variant covers. There's a John Romita Jr. one, stuff like that. This is my particular favorite. This is a cover by Gerardo Zaffino. It is currently available on, you can check your local comic shops, go to comicshoplocator.com, put in your zip code. You could probably, find it at your local comic shop. If they don't have it, or you really don't have a close local comic shop, you could go to dynamicforces.com. They have it available, and they also have it CGC graded. So you can check that out. JD is going to put both the Comic Shop Locator and the Dynamic Forces links in the chat. Thank you, JD. So remember, this is our pick of the week. It's a great series. Number 10 just came out, but go back, get #1, pick up the other ones. It is really, really good. And that cover is gorgeous. All right, Mark asks, hey, Dan, happy Thursday. It's Mark. I may have missed the Moon Knight discussion, but I wanted to make sure I let you know that I found episode 3 disappointing and boring. Oh, wow. Okay. We're doing the Moon Knight discussion right now. I get it. There was a lot of exposition, a lot of time spent setting up the Egyptian pantheon, the Ennead, the whole trial setup. But I'm still digging it because I think that we're just in such a unique story. I think this is going to be one of those series that once it's done, if you sit down and just binge it, it's going to be fantastic because it's got all these components going on, and I think it's laying out a really good story. So where I'm sorry you feel that way, Mark, but I get where you're coming from on it. There were some parts that seemed to drag a little bit, but I'm still with it. I'm still enjoying it. But let's jump back into the recap. And again, if you want to add to it, throw something in the conversation, feel free. Throw in your comments and we'll make it part of the conversation. All right, getting back to where we were. Mark is on the ledge with the kid. He takes him to the edge at Khonshu's urging, holds him over, and he's got this little scarf on, and he gets a little further back and a little further back, and he's hanging on by the scarf. And he's like, tell me where he is. Tell me where Harrow is. And the kid just goes, praise Amit, and pulls a knife and cuts his scarf. Plummets to his death. Yep, and that may be one of the best lines in the whole series. Khonshu, sitting on the ledge, goes, I thought he'd talk. It's just so casual and just, it's like, oh my God. Well, after that, Mark ends up arguing with Steven. And again, they're kind of arguing over what's just happened with all the dead, the dead guys and stuff like that. And Mark is saying, Steven, is this what you wanted? And Mark's like, I didn't, or Mark says that to Steven. Steven's like, I didn't do this, but if you have a problem with the body count, you should talk to that or stop listening to that stupid pigeon. And the idea of him calling Khonshu a pigeon, I think, is brilliant. I really like that. But again, they kind of, at that point, if it was me, I think I would stop and go, well, if you didn't do it and I didn't do it, I'd want some answers at that point. But they just kind of roll forward, and they're still trying to figure out how to find out what's going on. And Mark asks the question that we ask in every one of these things. Well, what about these people? What about why the Eternals didn't step in on Thanos? Da da da. And Mark says, well, why would if someone is trying to resurrect Amit, shouldn't the other gods get involved? Shouldn't they want to stop it? They did, imprison Amit. So why wouldn't they stop it? And basically, Khonshu says, look, we can call on them, but calling on them might get them angry enough to imprison you in stone. So basically, Khonshu's worried about calling in the other gods, thinking that they're going to take it out on him, because he's already been banished once, is what we learn. But their punishment is basically to encase him and trap him in stone, like a stone effigy. And if that happens, Khonshu basically says, hey, that's going to leave you without the healing armor trying to take on Harrow. And that's what I like to call foreshadowing. This whole set of lines foreshadows what happens in the rest of the episode. But Khonshu decides he's going to risk it anyway, and he does this little gesture and basically causes an eclipse, an unscheduled eclipse, which is enough to get the attention of the Ennead. And things start to move fast at this point. All the avatars start to gather. A portal pops up, almost like Diagon Alley in Harry Potter. And Mark goes through, and we end up inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, which excites Steven to no end. Even though he's not in control of the body, he can still see what's going on, and he is super, super excited. But we first meet Hathor and her avatar, Yatzil, and we get the sense that there's a relationship in the past between Khonshu and Hathor, that there might have been a romantic relationship between the two. She even says, well, Khonshu used to enjoy Hathor's harmonies. And it's like, is that a euphemism? That seems like a euphemism. Just saying. And Yatzil seems really nice to Mark, but I don't know. I get a kind of an odd vibe from her. Well, the rest of the Ennead shows up, and through their avatars, they end up kind of taking over. And the ones that show up are Horus, Isis, Tefnut, Osiris, and of course Hathor. Though they don't call Isis, they call her Isis. They pronounce it differently, but I've always just been told it was Isis. But well, if you count them and you count Khonshu, that makes 6 of the Ennead. That means 3 are missing, and I don't know what those 3 are. And even on the poster we saw in episode 1, there was only 7. So if you count Amit as the 7th, there's still 2 missing. So I'm kind of curious why we're missing 2 of the Ennead, to the point where they pointed out that we're missing them. In the first episode, it's supposed to be 9. So keep that in mind. Probably to avoid sounding like another ISIS from recent history. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Okay. They went with a different pronunciation. Well, Khonshu ends up taking over Mark and speaking through Mark. And we get this whole trial-like scene as he accuses. We first find out that there's a debate of why Mark or Khonshu was banished, and Osiris, through his avatar Selim, basically says you were banished for messing with the sky and basically almost revealing us. And Khonshu's like, no, I was banished because I refused to give up on humanity and abandon them like you did. And then we get Horus's avatar saying, we didn't abandon humanity, they abandoned us. Now we prefer just to use our avatars to observe. And Khonshu's like, no, we need more than observing. You guys need to come out of the Overvoid. They dropped the name Overvoid, which is another term that Marvel uses for the Celestial Heliopolis, which is that pocket dimension where the gods are supposed to be existing right now. But the way they treat him, you kind of get the idea that maybe Khonshu is a minor member of this group, that, they look down on him. And it could be because he's been banished or shamed, but it also seems like maybe they never really respected him in the first place. And also, all of the Enneads seem to be tier leveled and replaced. They kind of move up. Well, this group has retired now. This group is moving up. And Khonshu never really made that top tier, so that could be part of it as well. Now, he puts forth the accusation that Harrow is trying to resurrect Amit. And the Ennead do take that seriously, and they call Harrow forth, and they have this big discussion. But there is no battle here. Harrow is so much better at BSing than Khonshu is or Mark is. And basically, Harrow comes in and goes, I'm not doing anything. I am just visiting the desert. He's crazy. Khonshu's been looking for Amit's tomb, is trying to punish me for basically leaving. He's working through a very unwell man, and calls out the fact that, Mark and Steven, and basically calls him crazy, that he needs help. And the gods decide, okay, let's hear from Mark directly. And in doing so, they ask him if he's unwell, and Mark goes, yeah, I do need help. But that doesn't change the fact that Harrow is trying to do what we're saying he's trying to do. But he hasn't technically done anything yet. He hasn't committed any offenses. So Selim, Osiris's avatar, goes, this trial is concluded, there's no evidence, and everybody's allowed to leave. Now, as they're leaving and the gods relinquish the avatars, Yatzil comes up to Mark and says, look, there's another way you can find it. There was this Medjay named Senfu who was basically told the location of Amit's tomb. Even though the gods did not want to know where it was, they also did want to have someone who knew where it was. So in case, and as Yatzil put it, in case they changed their minds and wanted to show mercy, they could go to Senfu and find Amit. And then when Senfu died, that information was put into his sarcophagus. Well, basically, if Mark can find Senfu's sarcophagus, he can figure out where the dig site is. the sarcophagus had been stolen from the pyramid that it had been in and sold in the black market, then she suggests that's where Mark should begin looking. And again, I find this a bit suspicious that she has this information. I kind of get the feeling that maybe Haro and Yatzil or maybe Salim are in on this, that they want to bring Amit back, that they want the judgment thing to happen. It just seems a little convenient to me. So now from here, Mark heads back to the bazaar that he was in earlier where he got the taxi and chased the guys through. And while he's trying to get help, he goes to the right person in the right place to get information, but gets no help at all. And it's pretty much because he's not Egyptian. Layla comes up and tells him that, and then offers to help him. And Mark is worried, of course, because he doesn't, Layla thinks he's worried because Layla's got some enemies in Cairo. She says that her name pisses off a few people in Cairo. But it's obvious Mark's really worried is that Khonshu has his eye on Layla to be his next avatar. And that really, he doesn't want that because he knows the hell that he's currently going through. But we get a jump to them in a boat a little while later, and we find out that Layla had gone out and asked about the sarcophagus and was able to find that it was in the possession of Anton Mogart, someone that she is familiar with, and that she got an invitation to go visit his estate. Maybe it's an island. All I know is they're going there by a boat. And on the boat ride, you can see there's still the tension between the two of them. There's a lot of unresolved issues, and they still have feelings for each other, Layla and Mark. And there's a moment where it seems like they're trying to work it out. There's some singing and stuff in the boat by people at the other end. And Mark talks about how he hadn't heard the uvulating, I believe is the term for it, that they do during the singing, that since their wedding. And it makes them start talking. And Layla's like, look, you could have told me what was going on with you. We could have walked through this together. And Mark's like, yeah, we probably could have, but that's not what I do. I don't open up about things. And it's kind of sad because you feel like you want these characters to get back together, but Mark doesn't. Mark still wants to keep the distance because he doesn't want her in danger. So she's trying to reach him, and he's having no part of it. So now they get to Mogart's, and it's packed. There's just people everywhere, and they hide their gear. And Mark sees a suspicious boat coming in, and he thinks it may be Harrow's people, that they're following him, but he's not sure. And what's interesting is later on we see another moment where it seems like they're being followed. And again, it might be Harrow's people, or it might be somebody else. There might be another group involved here, because they don't say that it's Harrow's people for sure. Now, they get there, and the first person we meet is Beck, who's an actual character from the comics, and he's kind of Mogart's main security guy. And he mentions how that Layla and Mogart had a falling out that involved the island nation of Madripoor. And of course, anytime you hear an MCU reference, it's great. Madripoor, big in the Falcon and Winter Soldier series in comics, is a big part of the X-Men universe. So name dropping Madripoor is really cool. And again, that's going to get a lot of people excited. A lot of people who think, oh, the X-Men are coming back, the mutants are coming back. We'll see when that'll happen. We also come up to Mogart, and he's participating in a game called El Merma, which is this Egyptian fencing game. But unlike fencing we're used to, which is guys in white suits with masks and swords, these guys are usually bare-chested. They're riding around on horses carrying spears. So think of it as a cross between fencing and jousting. And you have El Merma. And Mark's like, oh, so he's rich enough just to throw together an El Marmot game in his backyard. And she's like, no, he's rich enough to get the world's best to come train him in his backyard. So we get a good idea of just how super rich this guy is. Now, Mogart in the comics is the alter ego of an art thief called the Midnight Man. He's a villain that appeared a few times in comics and stuff, and eventually his son took over the mantle. But I don't know how much we'll get into Midnight Man. The important thing is the actor. The actor playing Mogart is a famous French actor named Gaspard Ulliel, who sadly died back in January in a skiing accident at the age of 37. Now, I've seen a lot of people online speculating that his death has caused them to kind of trim down the character's part, to pare it down a bit, to, the fact that he rides off at the end and we don't see what happens to him. I don't think that's the case, because when he passed, the talk was, no, we got everything we needed. So I don't think that's going to be the case. Now, Mogart has Senfu's sarcophagus, and it's outside in a pyramid-shaped case that's, I don't know, about the size of a local 7-Eleven. It's this big pyramid. And he wants to know, well, why do you want this particular thing? And Mark doesn't know enough about Egyptian mythos and stuff, Egyptian history, to kind of BS an answer. So he goes, no, I just really want to see it. And I think that puts Mogart on suspicion, or on alert, where Steven probably could have come up with a good answer because he knows that stuff. Well, he lets them go in and look, and they're looking around, and he doesn't want to release Steven because he doesn't think Steven will give him the body back. Well, he says, well, do you want a bloodbath? Because if not, so Steven starts to help, but then I guess Mogart loses his cool, and next thing we know, there's guns drawn, and everybody, Beck tries to pull a gun on Mark. Mark just spins around, takes it out of his hand, and holds it, but there's about 4 guns on Layla. So it's not going well. And just when you think things are going to get worse, they do, but it's in the sense that Arthur Harrow shows up with his walking stick and his little crunch shoes, and basically tells Mogart that all the rumors and stuff surrounding these particular antiquities are true, and he can show him part of it. And he holds up the scarab and lets it float, and then he pulls out the staff, and he uses the staff to destroy Senfu's sarcophagus. But he's also, while doing this, he's talking to Mogart, he's talking to Layla and Mark, and he's kind of tapping into some of the secrets. And he's like, Layla, you left Cairo to get away from the pain of your father's death. And, you don't really know what happened. And Mark could tell you, but he's afraid that if he tells you that you'll see him the way he sees himself, as being unworthy of love. And he's really trying to get into their heads and drive this wedge between them. But once he destroys the sarcophagus, Khonshu's over on the side going, some of the suit, kick their ass, give them what they deserve. Come on, some of the suit. Well, after he destroys the sarcophagus, Mark summons the suit. Harrow beats it, and Mark ends up having to take on a lot of guards. I mean, there's a lot of people that are suddenly wanting to fight him with Layla, and he ends up trying to take out enough of them so Layla can run in and see if there's anything left in the sarcophagus. And she's able to get part of the contenage, which is the covering that goes over the body. That's where the information is. And she's able to get enough of it. But as she tries to get out of there, she gets confronted by Beck. And she has to take on Beck while Moon Knight has to take on 20 guys, something like that, like a ridiculous number. And a lot of the guys who were playing El Marmot now are chasing him with spears and horses. But we get to see some amazing Moon Knight action. The cape is flying around. He's throwing the crescent darts. But at one point, he starts just wailing on this guy. And Steven's like, stop, stop, stop. and he's able to force himself into control. Well, as soon as Stephen takes control, Moon Knight shifts into Mr. Knight, and he stops punching the guy and just kind of drops him and goes, "Are you okay? Okay." And he backs around. He goes, "All right, everybody, time out, time out." And it's almost like watching Deadpool at this point because it's kind of silly. He's like, "Look, I know we're all tense right now, but we just need to calm the F down." He doesn't even curse. He says F. Calm the F down. We can talk this out. And then suddenly someone runs him through with the spear. And the moment Stephen gets run through the spear, he's like, "Okay, Mark, you can take the body back." Second spear. Take the body, take the body, take the body. Switch back to Moon Knight. And he just takes a ton of damage. I think he gets stabbed like 3 or 4 more. I mean, just over and over with these spears. And, let's pause there. That's a good time for a break. We will come right back after this.
Thanks for tuning into The Experience. Help us out and hit subscribe over on YouTube and click the bell when you do. Need some help? Scan the QR code in the bottom corner.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
Everybody, welcome back to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. Today we're talking about Moon Knight Episode 3. We're doing a spoiler conversation, but also keep in mind that right after this is What's in the Box with Miss Jen, where she goes into her warehouse, randomly picks a box, brings it in, and sells whatever's in it. I keep waiting for the episode where she finds like a box of kittens or old Pokemon trading card or Pogs. Could you imagine if she finds a box of Pogs? What a weird show that would be. Well, thanks, man. It says your summary is more entertaining than the actual episode. I dig these dig the passion, the deep dives. Thank you very much. These are a lot of fun to do. So, all right, let's get back into it. We're almost at the end. So, basically, Mark takes out a bunch of people. Layla kicks Beck's butt, but she gets attacked by Mogart. He's riding at her on a horse, is about to hit her with a spear. Mark sees it, freaks out, races across in the Moon Knight costume, pulls her out of the way, rolls over, and throws a Crescent Dark into Mogart's back, and he kind of goes off into the fog. I wonder if we'll see him again. I hope so. Kind of want to see what they're going to do with that character. And more of that actor, since he's passed, would be good. But they grab a car, they leave, and they drive out to the middle of nowhere. Now, at some point, we hear, we've picked him up, we see him, as if somebody's watching him. And again, it could be Harrow, but it could be someone else. So while they're driving, of course, Layla starts asking Mark about what Harrow was talking about. How did he know why she moved out of Egypt, away from Egypt? And Mark, of course, does what Mark does, just denies everything. Just, no idea what he's talking about. He's just trying to mess with you. Don't believe a word he says. Can't trust the guy. And so he's just blowing the whole thing off. But we know that it's going to cause a big problem because he probably did either kill her dad or had something to do with it. So Now they get out to the middle of nowhere, and I don't know why they're in the middle of nowhere, but they're in the middle of nowhere. And they start trying to put the cartonnage back together. Well, they don't know what they're doing. So Layla is finally like, look, we need Stephen. And even Khonshu pops up and goes, I summon the gods and you summon the worm. He'll never let you have the body back. Well, Stephen just is fed up with it. And he rips the mirror off the door of the car. And I'm thinking, it's really tough driving your car without the side view mirror. I wish he wouldn't have done that. But he, of course, lets Stephen take over. And Stephen gets on the ground and he starts putting this stuff together. And Layla comes over and kneels next to him. And you see, you start seeing this genuine affection she has towards Stephen. I mean, we know she has feelings for Mark, but she also seems to have a genuine affection for Stephen, which could be really interesting later on. And I'll get to that after the recap. And he figures out, he makes kind of a star shape out of it, like he's doing origami, or like a 3-year-old origami with duct tape. But when they look at it, they see this constellation in the center. And what they do, they can pinpoint the coordinates of where the tomb is, but they need to know what the night sky looks like the night that Amit was entombed. Well, Khonshu goes, I remember that night. I remember every night. And it is the most melancholy answer where you suddenly go, oh, Khonshu, who hurt you? What's wrong? Was it that Herrick woman? Did her song just not work? I mean, you start feeling for Khonshu for just a second there. And then he does this big selfless act. He basically sacrifices himself to roll the night sky back to what it was 2,000 years ago. And in doing so, it would signal to the gods he's messing with the sky again, like he did before, and it pissed him off. So he knows that he's going to be they're going to basically imprison him in stone if he does it, but he does it anyway. But he has to have Stephen help him. So you got Stephen in the Mr. Knight costume standing next to Khonshu, and they're doing this like swipe left thing as they're rolling the sky back, and everybody around is seeing it. You got flying stars going by and vapor trail. It's just really neat looking scene. But again, that's when that song, if we could rewrite the stars, come into mind. I wish I could play that here to that. I think that would be neat. But so he gets it to the right spot, and Layla is able to pinpoint the location. But while all this is going on, we see Harrow in the desert. He rolls the window down of this truck he's in, and he's like, oh, you've brought this on yourself, Khonshu. And then we go inside the Pyramid of Gaza, and you have the 5 avatars we saw before suddenly working together with this piece of stone in the statue, and it's being shaped into an effigy of Khonshu as they're using their magic. And sure enough, by the time they figure out where the location is, Khonshu kind of dissolves into nothing, trapped inside the little effigy, and Mark/Stephen passes out, and Layla can't wake him. So now Mark is without Khonshu, which means he might be without Khonshu's abilities, so he might not have access to the armor, which we know is healing and strength and all that other stuff. So he may have to go forward to... Oh, and Khonshu tells Stephen to tell Mark to free him. So Mark is going to have to figure out how to get into the temple or the Pyramid of Giza, and find a way to get Khonshu out of there. So, and then of course we go to the Pyramid of Giza, and Salim, avatar of Osiris, is walking Harrow around going, oh, you were right about Khonshu. He gave us no choice. And Harrow's like, can he hear us? And they're like, we think so. And then they leave him alone with the statue, and I'm thinking he's going to break the statue. But he doesn't. He picks it up, and he basically tells Khonshu, I really enjoyed hurting people in your name. And that's the penance that I have to pay still. That's the sin I carry. But, I'm going to finally do what you couldn't. And when I do, my victory will be because of you. So basically, he's like, you forged me into what I am. It's almost like a Batman type speech. You made me who I am. Now, and that's where we end with the little statue of Khonshu in the Pyramid of Giza. Now, what we can take away from this episode, there's definitely another persona, and this one that's more violent than Mark. We also know that Mark had something to do with Layla's father's death, and perhaps Harrow did as well. Maybe Harrow is the one that hired Mark and the mercenaries to find the tomb, and is the one that did all this. Maybe he's kind of replacing the Raoul Bushman character from the comics. That would be kind of interesting. Also, it does feel like Harrow is working with maybe another member of the Ennead, whether it's Salim or Yatzil. It just seems like there's something more going on here. Also, the affection we see Layla towards Steven. This is interesting because in the comics, Layla is kind of the MCU version of Marlene from the comics. And Marlene had a relationship with Mark, but she seemed to prefer Steven persona over Mark. And then much later on in the comics, she ends up having a family with Jake, the cab driver. So it's possible that we're building towards what could be the strangest love triangle to ever show up on screen. Layla's in a love triangle with Mark and Steven and maybe Jake. And that would be kind of weird. But all right. So that is pretty much my recap summary, what I take away from the show. I am absolutely loving it. I am really enjoying the series. I cannot wait to see what happens next. I finish each episode thinking, wow, that was a lot. I have to catch my breath. And then about a day later, I'm like, okay, when's the next episode? Which is unlike previous Marvel series and most TV shows where you get to the end of the episode, it's like, let's get the next one right now. This one, I'm like, okay, I need a day. JD says, it hit me that the image in the credits with Mark's face is separated from his head. There are three faces. Yeah, exactly. There are three faces of him. So I think we've always had this setup for three personas. And that's what he has in the comics is three personas, three main personas. He has other ones as it goes along, but that's the main thing. But all right, we'll come back next week, do a batch of shows. I'm probably looking at doing a writing show where I may actually show you guys the art of writing a comic script, from plotting and everything else, going through the thing. That's going to come up soon. I'm not sure exactly when. Depends on what we got scheduled for next week. But of course, we'll have an episode on episode 4 of Moon Knight and whatever else pops up. Stick around for Miss Jen. What's in the Box is up right now. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. Good night.
Join the party. Head over to our Linktree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.